Hi, today we'll be looking at king and pawn endings with isolated pawns, which is the final part of the introduction. After that we'll be looking at the endings where the black side has pawns himself, which means we'll get to learn some defensive techniques. So in this position we are threatening to promote both pawns, but it looks like that the king is in both squares. So after king to a4, it looks like that this pawn is going to get captured, followed by the capture of the second pawn after king to b3 and king c3, or if c4, then king takes c4. But the cool thing about pawns that are separated by only one file is that you can push the second pawn forward, c4. Now if king takes a3, then c5 and the pawn promotes. So the only move to stop this pawn is king to a5, and now king g2. So king to b6 following the original plan, and now we can push the other pawn forward. Then if king c5, a5. In the position after king b6, we don't play king f3 because then the pawns don't protect each other anymore. So king c5, and then the pawns do get captured. So king b6, king f3 is a bad move, we play a4. So every time that the king goes into the middle between the pawns, you advance one of them, the one that's behind. So king c5, a5, and then king to c6. When that happens, king f3, and then king b7. It's in the middle again, so we can advance one of the pawns, the ones that's behind, c5. So king a6, and now we advance that pawn again, c6, king a7, king e4, king b8, now we advance the other pawn again, a6, king c7, a7, and then this barrier says, you're not going to catch me. There's no way to stop the promotion of this pawn. The square is only this, and both of these squares cannot be accessed by the king. So it's going to get promoted. In the second example, with white to move, we just play d6. So black to move has to take care of these pawns, but how? Because if king takes f5, then that's a huge mistake, because then king d4, king f6, king c5, king e7, king c6, and as we've seen before, this is a promotion. King d8, king d6, king c8, king e7, the pawn promotes. This barrier guarantees the promotion. So he can't also play king g5, which doesn't do anything. We just do the same plan as before. Instead, we have to play king e5. And this isn't about attacking both pawns at the same time. It's actually about keeping a barrier between the king. We're blockading the king from protecting any of the pawns. And now white has to make a move. If white moves one of the pawns, then we just capture that one. So d6, we just capture it, and if king to f4, king to e7, king to g5, king to g7, and we're on time for the blockade. So the only move is to actually just move the king, threatening to protect this pawn, followed by advancing it and then securing the promotion square. But the problem is that after king to d3, we don't take this pawn because of the plan I just discussed. We keep in front of the king. Whenever you're in doubt about what pawn to take, it's best to be the one that allows you to be in front of the king, because you want the king to be blockaded from further action. You want to restrict it. The only move now is f6, but you can see that we can get in the square by either playing e6 or even d6. After f7, the square is this. The only move is king to e7, and then we can catch the pawn just on time. After this position, though, the threat was to queen. So black tries to stop that with king c7. And then we have king e6 protecting the pawn, but then king d8, and now we have a stalemating possibility. So the trick about these positions is that when it looks too easy, it's because it has a trick behind it, like a stalemate. So b6 ends up in stalemate. There's a barrier here, the king protects these squares, and the pawn protects these squares, so it's stalemate. So after that, we can only go to this square king d5, because if king d6, stalemate, king d5. Now it looks like that it's going to be a draw. I mean, the black king is blockading the white king. For example, if king c5 now, king c7, that's a draw. But the cool thing is that we can prevent king c7 from happening by playing b6. This prevents king to c7. The only way for black to continue is to play king c8 or king d8. If king c8, king c6, and now king b8, b7, and we promote. The only move then is king d8. And as I just said, you always want to stay in front of the king. There's no rush in these endings without pieces, especially without queens, because queens make everything complicated. And they make time go really fast. But when there's no pieces on the board, it's just all about taking your time. For example, king c6, king c8, and it's a draw. b7, king d8, king d6, stalemate. So just stay in front of the king. So king d8. And now king c8, king c6, king b8, b7, and we promote as we've previously seen before. Here we have an interesting position where the pawns don't protect each other. The threat was king b8 followed by a6, a7, a8. So black tries to stop that by king b6. And now we can't play a7 because of the stalemate that we saw in the rook pawns video. King c7, where the black king prevents the white king from even getting out. The only move is c5, and then after king c8, c6, king c7, there is no move for white to do, stalemate. So king b6, king b8 is the only move. But this actually happens to work because the king takes the pawn. The threat was a6, a7, a8. This still works because after king takes a6, king c7, and this affects a barrier on the black king. The black king cannot get close to this pawn at all. So, for example, the only way for it to try to capture this pawn is to go this way. And so then king to a5. Then we just play king d6, king b6, c5 check, king b7, king d7, and this is a guaranteed promotion. If black tries to do something sneaky like king a7, that's not really going to work. We still keep the barrier alive by playing c5, king a8, and then we can just play c6, king a7, king d7. This barrier prevents any capture. King b6, c7. So it's all about restricting the king. And here the king is very far away. So restriction is not going to happen. But the good thing about this is that even though the pawns with 2 files apart have no protection for each other, they're so far advanced that when one is about to get captured, the second one just advances. So king a6 and now d6. This pawn is about to promote. The black king has to get within this square. So the only way for it to do that is to go to king b7, because if king b6, that's an illegal move. King b7, now a6. And if it tries to get in the square of this pawn, it certainly is, but then we play a7, and now it has to get this pawn under control. So king b7, but then d7, and it can't stop both pawns. So after a6 we capture it, but then d7, and there's no way for the black king to get into the square. So the pawns are far advanced. It's important not to play any king moves here. It's not necessary, and it'll actually get you in trouble. For example, king g2, a5, and this pawn's gonna get captured. King f3, and king b6, king e6, king e4, king c7. So the pawn's not going to get captured, but it's going to get blockaded. King e5, king d7, there's a blockade. So just let the pawns do their thing when they're past the 5th rank. When they're past the 4th rank though, they're going to need the king's help. So after king a5, you can't just play d5 right away, because then we'll play king b6. And then if a5, then king takes a5, followed by the capture of this pawn. After all, it's still in the square of the d5 pawn. So the king is going to have to come to help. And so after king to a5, then king to g2. Believe it or not, this will be in time. King takes a4, king f3, king b5, king e4, king c6, and then king e5. And we're just on time to promote this pawn. Now when it's here, it's actually pretty unfortunate for the king, because he's badly placed. For example, after if it was white to move, then king b2 actually wins. But here it's black to move. So let me set that up. King a5, king b2, we take this pawn, king c3. The difference is that in the other position, the king was on f3, so it can go to e4 and e5, followed by the guaranteeing of this promotion path. But here it can't do that because it's obstructed by its own pawn, so it can't get to e5 on time. It'll take one more move, and that one more move is all that black needs. After king b5, king d3, king c6, king e4. With one more move, we would be on e5, but now black stops that by playing king d6, and the game is drawn. After this position, which is the one where the pawns are 3 files apart, the thing that black can do is simply to contain these pawns. But even after king c5, a5, and then trying to capture this pawn with king b5, then the pawn goes to e5, and there's no way for it to stop this promotion. It's not going to get in the square. So with pawns on the 5th rank, you can just take care of them. The pawns can take care of themselves if they are on the 4th rank or more. When the pawns are on the 3rd rank or more, they cannot advance by themselves. For example, the pawn goes to e4. So if black plays king c4, pawn goes to e4, king d4, a4, king takes, a5. Are we in the square? Well, it looks like we can get in. a6, king c6, we're gonna catch. And the rule of the square is just always really helpful when you're considering these situations. So the black king can only contain this. If it tries to go for one of the pawns, then it is free to advance. And it's definitely not going to catch up. But luckily, white has a king. So king c4, king g2, king c3, king f3, and there's no blockade, so this pawn's going to promote. And the final position is this one, where the pawns are more than 4 ranks, when the pawns are 4 ranks or more apart. And you could just simply advance one of the pawns to the 4th rank, and the king will be out the square. For example, king d3, a4, it tries to catch that one, so it plays king c4 and then f4. And you could just deduct, since if the pawns with 3 or more files apart on the 4th rank will promote, if they're 4 or more files apart, it's going to happen. And there's no way for it to catch up. The king doesn't even have to do anything, it's so far away. So that's it on king and pawn, and this is the introduction. In the next videos, we will look at what to do when the black side has pawns, and we will have to consider some defense for that. But it gets really exciting. So that's all you need to know about when you have pawns yourself. And if you like this video, make sure to give it a like. And feel free to donate. I really appreciate it. And the link is in the description. And I'll see you in the next video.